So I'll be talking about a topic that I'm really passionate about, which is using art as a tool to communicate science. My name is Dr. Beata Mierszwa, and I'm a postdoc at UCSD in San Diego. In the lab, I study how human cells divide with the aim to improve the way we treat cancer. Along my academic career path, I also create science art and fashion to communicate science. And I'm also passionate about science outreach, so I love using video games, and student workshops, and art to share the beauty of biology with the world and get creative students excited about science. I decided to create a video game. I grew up playing video games. I always loved how they create these, fantastical worlds that you can really immerse yourself in. But when I was in school, the idea to use games or even other kinds of interactive media in education was not a concept at all. So we didn't have any of this. It was really only after I started studying science that I realized so much of the magic behind what makes life possible often completely gets lost when you look at a textbook, right? So you have all of these super simplified diagrams, you have these complicated names to memorize, and it can all seem quite intimidating, especially if you're a student who is getting introduced to science for the first time. So with this game, we wanted to take the opportunity to depict the molecular world in a kind of more visual and a more dynamic way. Something that basically brings people closer to the world we see when we look through the microscope, as opposed to how it's presented in textbooks. So we teamed up with a few people and created this game. Here's an introduction sequence of the game. You can see our character is wearing a lab coat, and she's a girl, and she's floating through the cell, and she's getting first glimpse of this world. And you can see a lot of the structures that you can see in the textbooks are here in the game as well, but everything else kind of feels a bit more dynamic, a little bit more alive than how you see it in the textbook. So we really wanted to create this really immersive atmosphere by using all these engaging visuals, by using interesting music, and really try and bring this world to life. The aim of the game is to allow the player to explore the cell, learn about it as they explore it, and solve puzzles that are based on real science. As you know, some molecular mechanisms can be a bit more difficult to explain in a traditional way. So if you think about the mitochondria, right, it's known as the powerhouse of the cell that generates energy, and it's often depicted as this typical bean-shaped structure. Inside the mitochondria, you have this series of reactions that is called the electron transport chain. So this is a series of reactions that generates cellular energy in the form of ATP. So don't worry about looking at this too much in detail. This was just to show you kind of how it's often depicted in textbooks. Basically, what you can see here, it's a series of reactions that can be quite difficult to portray and teach in an intuitive and non-intimidating way. So with this game, we wanted to give people the chance to experience this in a more engaging way. And so I started with some sketching and collecting some ideas, and we wanted to take each of these complexes here in this series of reactions and make a puzzle out of it, so you can learn about it as you solve it. And here's the final result. So this is the mitochondria level of the game. You can see the typical shape of the membranes, the folded membranes here. You can walk around with your character inside. We made sure to make everything look a little bit industrial as kind of a visual reference to the powerhouse of the cell. Each of these structures here, each of these are puzzles, and the structures roughly matches the shape of the actual protein that you see up here. Each of the puzzles illustrate each of these chemical reactions. Here's an example. Here are two puzzles in action. On the left side, you can see the complex that converts oxygen into water. What you can see here is the yellow electrons here are being transported on this chain to power the reaction. And so we decided to literally draw a chain as a reference to the name electron transport chain. So if a student plays this, maybe they haven't learned about the electron transport chain yet, but when they learn about it later, they might remember, oh, there were electrons being transported on a chain. We've tried to play around with a lot of these visual metaphors. And then so the player is adding these red protons to the reaction. Each time they do that, it changes the structure of the oxygen into water. And once the puzzle is solved, you'll be able to see drops coming out of this faucet, just to show you that the molecule that you just generated is water. So just in case you're not familiar with what the atomic structure looks like. As this happens, the protons are getting pumped from this compartment to the bottom, and this is needed to power the next machine. And so what's happening here is this one converts ADP and the phosphate, so those two things, into ATP. And you can see it's basically doing this by pressing them together, kind of to show how sometimes changes in the structure of the protein helps catalyze chemical reactions. And then you can take these ATP molecules and you can use them to power a motor protein in the cell that helps our character get to the next section inside the cell. So like I said, we used a lot of these visual metaphors to combine these abstract concepts in science with things we know from everyday life. So players can really learn passively and without prior knowledge of the cell. And this is an approach we took for basically all of the puzzles. Here's another quick final example. This shows the concept of how a lot of the structures in the cell are actually very dynamic. So these microtubules here, they have these cycles of growing and shrinking. And so when the player adds building blocks to it, it changes the equilibrium to the growth phase, and you can create a bridge that you can walk across. And after solving the puzzle, the player receives a trophy, which holds more information if they want to learn more about it. That's kind of the approach that we took for the game. And after working on this for several years while also doing my research, we finally got to share it with the public. And we had a chance to present it during the San Diego Comic-Con at the Comic-Con Museum. And it was just a fantastic opportunity to watch people play and see how students interact with the game outside of a classroom setting. So we were, next to some other amazing exhibits with dinosaurs and Star Wars. And it was amazing to see that kids were still choosing to spend time to play our game. Some kids wanted to keep playing while their parents wanted to leave. It was just really lovely and amazing to see how we can make science interesting, exciting by using all of this interactive media and new technologies and get a whole new audience excited about science. So it's been a really interesting experience. What this made me realize is that despite all of the conferences I've been to and all of the amazing scientists I've had the pleasure to work with, some of these most impactful interactions have actually been sharing science with younger students. And so, every time you participate in an outreach event, there has been these aha moments where you can really see that you sparked something like a passion or an interest or a curiosity into science that can grow and lead to someone really becoming as you're interested in. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this video, you might like one of the similar videos above, or one of the other science, art, legislative, entertainment, and humanist videos from HFFC's YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button above.